I just got back from Detroit 2 weeks ago, and my parents have now moved back into downtown Detroit. And it's really funny visiting because they talk about all of these places like I know them, and they're like, oh, we're just going to go around to this place. I'm like, you guys, you realize I haven't lived here for 18 years. And last time I spent any time in downtown Detroit, the street that your apartment's on was a street that like was recommended we don't walk down.
Okay.
Because the safety level has shifted so much, and now it's like Detroit, you can walk around, there's great restaurants, there's great bars, it's fun, it's lively, and it's great, but it's also kind of unnerving to be walking around downtown Detroit because I just don't know it very well anymore, and my folks are like, oh yeah, we're going to walk over here, and I'm like, can we do that?
Yeah, really? Okay. Yeah, I always associate it with Eminem and 8 Mile and all that stuff, and I don't know anything about any that much at all. So,
and so many people, that's their reference for Detroit and kind of the surge of 90s movies that took place in Detroit, Beverly Hills Cop and RoboCop, and that were showing this really desolate, dark, crime-ridden interpretation of Detroit, which wasn't too far off from the reality there at the time. But out of that, everyone just moved away and left opportunity that took years and years to rebuild. And it's still being rebuilt. But what they're rebuilding the city into is really wonderful. Like, it's great to walk downtown and see families and kids like skating in the downtown ice rinks they've built and going in and out of restaurants and feeling warm and this really inviting feeling to the downtown area that hasn't been there at any point in my life. So it's really, and the food, every time my folks, we can't go to any of my favorite restaurants because there are too many good new ones they want to introduce me to.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's really good news. I didn't know about that at all. That's kind of interesting to me too, also because I had been reading that so much of the literal infrastructure, meaning the pipes and the sewers, had been corrupted and burst because plants had grown through them and through windows and houses. All the sidewalks had buckled and the roads were crumbling. So to hear about
and that's
this is,
still definitely the case. I mean, just last week, a water pipe burst, and the entire downtown area has been on a boil water warning for a week of like, just boil your water before you drink it just to make sure. And there's still things like that are going on because of the decades and decades of corruption and poor city planning and neglect that went into those areas that, you know, a handful of years ago when people were talking about, you can go to Detroit and buy a house for $5,000 and, you know, you can buy a building. Yeah. And yes, that was a reality, but there were also realities that came with that house where I had friends who moved into certain neighborhoods that were basically abandoned, had been half burned down. Some of the houses had been started to be rebuilt, but the building developments went bankrupt in the midst of building it. So they moved into these houses that they got for a steal, like to buy a house outright for $5,000 that needs, you know, another $15,000, $20,000 worth of work, but you're still buying a house for, you know, $25,000.
May or may not have been structurally sound, but that's your job, is to fix it up. Right?
But then what they would find out is municipalities, things like, okay, so garbage trucks don't come here. You have to drive your garbage a couple of miles to this drop-off spot.
Really?
Because the city no longer had the population to support the municipalities that have been built within it. And all of those things that we don't really think about, but electric and water and garbage pickup, availability to emergency services.
I was going to ask that next. Yes.
Ambulances, police, things like that were really stretched thin because Detroit got to the point its population was around 2 million. And then and that's around when I was born in 81. it was nearing 2 million. And then over the next 25 years, it went down to like 650, 700,000.
Wow.
And with that exodus, you also have the exodus of a lot of tax money that was paying for the structure that had been built for those people.
Absolutely. I can see that as being a major issue. I'm always curious about how people cope, with you don't have any of these things that came with the assumption that you paid your taxes. This is what you pay for civilization for, and then you don't have this anymore.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. So that gives you a different perspective, I have to say, especially going back. It definitely jolts you into a different way of looking at your background, right?
Yeah, it's very exciting, and it's great. It's also one of those where it's a little bit like, damn, why weren't you like this when I was figuring out where I wanted to live? I would have stayed here. This is kind of fun. Not that I would trade my years in New York for anything, but
I completely agree with that.